With me now are Miranda Adderley, member of the Bahamas Bar Association, and Khalil Parker, KC, president of the Bahamas Bar Association. Good morning and welcome back to Bahamas at Sunrise.
Good morning. Thank you for having us again.
It's always nice to have you on. I feel like we get so much information out of you. But today we're talking about the incidences down at the Bahamas Department of Corrections, right? So we want to get right into it. What are your thoughts on these incidences? Who wants to start?
Well, firstly, again, we hate to come here and talk about these types of things. You know, violence is so real in our society and it's not something that we are proud of. However, it is something that's happening and we want to discuss it. So recently, an inmate was attacked and killed at the Bahamas Department of Corrections. And as the story goes, the alleged attacker was actually on bail. Sorry, not on bail, was being held in custody for a murder of another cellmate. So this would be the second time now that this person would have been accused of an attack leading to the death of another inmate. So it raises a lot of questions. Yeah. What really is going on?
Yes, that's my question. How does that happen? How does something like that happen?
I think, you know, being humans, we understand how conflict can lead to tragic results, impulse control, but I think that one of the things that we have to take a step back and look at is the objectives and the point of the system. You know, we have a correctional system and systems produce results. You have a digestive system, you put good in, you get something else out. And the reality is that as we approach these issues, we have to understand that you are dealing with human beings. You know, they are sentenced to time in prison. They're not sentenced to murder, they're not sentenced to rape, they're not sentenced to degrading and inhuman treatment. Right. And it is very important that we don't dehumanize people in custody, because the vast majority of them are coming back out to us if they make it through the system. So we have to make sure that when you are, as a state and as a people, saying that we are going to detain people at His Majesty's pleasure, we have the facilities, we have the systems in place to make sure that they are able to serve their time and pay their debt to society without being re-traumatized or traumatized. And it's also important to unpack the impulses we get as Bahamians. You know, some people say when you talk about the death penalty, you have to realize that you're asking another human being to execute that act. And you say, well, I'll pull the switch, I'll pull the lever, and you have to understand that the spirit behind that is one where you are saying that you yourself, without any connection with the issue, are prepared to facilitate the ending of another person's life. And if you reduce that, you get back to the situation where the accused murderer or the guilty murderer with respect to execution, they had a choice to make, and they chose, for whatever sense of grievance they had, to commit that horrible act. So I think that we have to take the emotion out, and we have to understand that the idea of prison is punishment, yes. The punishment should fit the crime, yes. But we have to be sure that we are doing our best not to become ourselves brutalizers.
Okay. And I think one thing is that people have to understand that the prison facility is not just for those who are convicted. The prison facility is also for those who are awaiting trial. So these persons are presumed innocent. These persons have not been brought before the courts for justice as yet, and maybe for whatever reason they haven't been granted bail, or they have been granted bail, but their families aren't able to assist them with posting the bail. So they have nowhere to go but sit there until their trial date. Now we're aware about the great delays that it takes for a trial to come up. Right now, their trial date's getting given out in 2027, 2028. So that's some 2-3 years. You're sitting there, presumed innocent. And now we're in an environment where shortly after that report with the person who had gotten killed, there was another report about an inmate maybe battling some mental health issues, which brings the question is, are the right facilities there for those persons who are vulnerable with such conditions? And apparently this person was in charge of cleaning out the slop bucket, which goes back to the conditions of the prison. There's no plumbing facilities. So they're dealing with the slop bucket. They use the slop bucket as a weapon. There's an attack. Persons have to go to the hospital. Is this the condition that persons who are awaiting a trial, who are presumed innocent, who can actually be innocent, even though a lot of people don't believe that, should be in? Are they going to come out the same if they are successful at trials and they're found not guilty or acquitted, or the Crown brings a nollie which withdraws the case after a year or 2 years living under those conditions? So these are serious concerns. As Khalil said, most of these persons do end up back in society.
Yeah, I mean that is super sad, right? Because like
Yes.
you said, I mean this person, could potentially be innocent at the end of the day, but then the trauma has already happened. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I want to touch a little bit on, you talked about like the objective of the prison. In your opinion, is the objective what it needs to be, or does that need to change?
I think that we have to actively engage with that subject. We have an environment here where the public there's a sense that the public, that there's anything is too good for people in the prison, and it gives the government an excuse to drag their feet on improving the condition. I mean, when you have served your term, you cannot untake out the slop bucket. You can't remove those memories and that trauma from yourself. And the question is, if nobody should live in those conditions, and the reality is that cannot be a feature of the punishment, even though in our minds, in the collective minds, that that's, you're in prison, that's what it's supposed to be.
And that's exactly what the mindset is, right? Because it's like, you if you're in prison, you've done the crime. So I want to know then, what are the rights of people that that end up in prison? What's the rights of a criminal?
The Constitution affords the government the right to incarcerate people once certain steps are taken.
Right.
They don't lose their they lose their right to liberty.
Right.
Which is sacrosanct to me, and that is the point of the prison. And there are other objectives that we superimpose upon that, but their protection from degrading and inhuman treatment still stands.
Right. Yeah.
Because
so safety, security, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Access to proper mental health care, access to proper physical health care. There's a lack of medical facilities available to the persons in those conditions.
Right.
And that shouldn't be.
Exactly. And then I want to know too then, because we would think that if you're in prison, I mean, that's like maximum security and safety, but people somehow are getting their hands on, some sort of device to be able to harm another individual. So how do they get that access?
I mean, the prison is a facility that has that is running day-to-day activities, and anything can be weaponized if you have a determined mind. They screen their visitors, and I'm sure that they conduct searches, but a determined prisoner who has nothing to do all day but to devise and scheme, so you have to mitigate, you can't eliminate. So I think that leaves it open, but it's also important that there are degrees of criminality. There are people who have committed no violent crime, there are drug offenses, there are stealing by reason of employment, there's all sorts of reasons you can go into jail, and these are people who are nevertheless subjected to the very things that we are talking about, and and have to cope with that and come back to their families.
And the reason for that is overcrowding, really. Our cells that may have been made for 3 prisoners are now holding up to 15 persons. Wow. So when you have overcrowding, persons who are on remand are now mixing with persons who are convicted. Yeah. You have persons who are juveniles or young people mixing with persons who they shouldn't be mixed with adults. Yeah. You have, different
mentally ill people.
Mentally ill people mixing with people who are not diagnosed with mental health problems. Are the facilities there for rehabilitation, which is one of the main objectives of the Bahamas Department of Corrections? Yeah. People go there and they talk about being in cells for 13 hours, 14 hours, no access to books, no access to reading, no access to any mental stimulation.
Is any correction taking place?
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like we can talk about this forever. Yes. We definitely need to have you all on again because, I mean, this is a hot topic, right? Yes. But, I mean, we are about to close, but I just want to know, yes or no, do you feel safe going into the prison? Yes, no?
I feel safe going into prison.
Yes, okay. What about you?
I feel safe going in to see my clients, but I must say I'm happy when it's time to go.
Okay,
yes.
All right. Well, it was such a pleasure having you both on. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You've been watching Bahamas at Sunrise. We'll be right back.